Hey, it's Greg. This is the Square Pizza Pod, cooked up by Shermco.
Hey everyone, this is Julia. I'm a communications fellow at Shermco, and I'm excited to bring you guys another episode of the Square Pizza Pod. Greg, our founder and host, was a guest on Dr. Stacey Gonzales' podcast, The Ed Up Edge, where she talks all things K through 12 public education. With that in mind, you will find in this episode discussions surrounding the educational system, supporting stakeholders, ownership when it comes to students in schools, and what school choice really means, and so much more. Hope you guys enjoy this one.
We have a exciting guest with us who maybe at some point is going to also talk about his musical interests, as we alluded to in our pre-show discussion. Today I have with me Greg. Are you ready? We're going to get this right.
Try my best. Yeah.
All right. Greg Schermbeck Co. Yep. Right? And he's the founder and principal. And so really out the gate, Greg, so glad to have you here today. Really excited that you are taking some time out of your day to spend with us and our audience.
No, pleasure. Thanks so much for reaching out and having me, and love the podcast and checked out a few episodes. So I'm going to try my best to keep up with all the other great guests you've had.
All right. Well, here's your opening. It's a real tough one. Tell us a little bit about who you are, Greg.
Yeah, good question. I'm a human, aspiring business leader, business owner and leader, and former educator that is, doing their best to partner with schools and nonprofit organizations and philanthropic organizations to really drive change in the communities they're serving.
That's a tall order, driving change in our educational system with our stakeholders. How did you find yourself to that place?
Yeah. Ironically, I guess maybe is the short answer. Long answer, started in education as a teacher in Charlotte, went to and taught high school for 3 years and coached football. So already off topic, but the high school I taught at, West Charlotte High School, Patrick Williams graduated from, who's now a Chicago Bull. So since you're in Chicago and you already made the Charlotte Hornets reference, we have a quick Chicago basketball connection there. Went to Nashville.
If we're going to talk though about the Bulls, we've got to talk about the 92-93 Bulls, because ain't nobody wanted to talk about the 2021 Bulls, really.
That's fine. Yeah, hey, I'm a big Jordan fan and love The Last Dance and everything else, and so happy to reminisce about the old. Went to Nashville, Tennessee to help open. I was on a founding team of a charter school in an under-resourced area in Nashville. Went to grad school and then had a crazy idea to launch the company after graduating grad school.
And what was there had to have been an impetus. There had to have been something that said, oh, or did you wake up and say, I should just launch a company and name it after myself? Like what? Sherm sounds like Germco. I don't know. Let's just go with it.
Yeah, none of the above. I think, it was certainly a long, journey, probably personally and professionally. Never really loved school when I was going to school. Just went so I could play sports, frankly. And then when I quickly realized, well, not as quick as probably I should, but when I realized in college that my athletic days were going to soon come to an end, realized I needed to do something else. And then learned, so I was an urban planning major and kind of learned about how cities were formed and maybe how they shouldn't be formed, and some structural and political inequities that have led to our cities being built the way they've been built. Found out about a program called Teach for America and thought that was the closest thing related to urban planning with my own experience of like rethinking what education should or could look like. So that's the short answer of how it came through. But then through that experience, through the charter school experience, through grad school, still felt like school wasn't serving many kids in many communities, particularly Black and brown populations, well at all. And that if we wanted cities, if we wanted communities, if we wanted our country to really thrive, we really needed to rethink what public education and other connected markets and sectors look like and acted like. And then throughout that experience as well, kind of related, like we hired either directly from the charter school or other administrators earlier in my career, hired consulting firms, groups, PD firms to come in to kind of tell us like what to do, but didn't actually help us like do it or tailor it in a way where it wasn't like cookie cutter or smoke and mirror stuff. And all that. And then in grad school, learned in like my consulting 101 course and my business and education class that consulting is like a $6 billion a year kind of global market, if not more. And that only like the professor has some stat that only like 0.001% of that budget goes to implementation or solutions for clients. And so none of it made sense, right? The personal experience of like having received consulting services and those, and then learning about the consulting model from grad school, it didn't seem to make sense. And so it felt like we had some services and strategies to support those that we were seeking to serve. And also wasn't excited about any, frankly, of the professional opportunities that either weren't being offered to me or the ones that were being offered to me. So felt like had little to lose and a lot hopefully to gain and to offer others. So that's how we launched the firm. And then in terms of the naming, I really hate that it's actually named partly after my last name, but it's, as maybe challenging to name a company, particularly in school, because it's like yellow bus or red apple or pencils. And I was like, I was like Googling names. I was like translating stuff into like Greek. And at one point, Schirmbeck's not a very like common name. So it was default, but I'm sticking with it.
Yeah, well, hey, it makes you unique, right? And we know that unique in this market is great. It's also unique what you're doing, because I think you're right. As a longtime school administrator, started saying similar to you, a high school teacher, right?
Yep.
Not school administrator.
Shout out to high school teachers.
Shout out to high school teachers. There certainly is this notion that the best consultants that I've worked with have used this line, and it's one that I like to use when I work with others in consulting roles, is that if I do my job well, I will have successfully worked my way out of a job. Because what that means is you have completely embodied the research, the understanding, the practicalities to make the culture change that we need to see in education. And so I'm wondering for you and the work that you're doing, what are those culture changes? What are those shifts that you're bringing into schools? And what does that look like? What does success look like?
Yeah. First, I mean, that's great. And I think it's certainly true. And it's usually the part of a conversation where I say no offense to any other consultants or consulting firms. And know that maybe our model is a bit different from others in terms of like us putting skin in the game and being really focused on implementation and results. But I think we would rather fail and close as an organization doing too much than doing too little, and just being really intentional about the projects we have. So I think that's to build off your point, hopefully something we're doing and thinking about differently. In terms of the change, right? I think the best answer, but also the true answer is it certainly depends on the projects and those that we are serving. And so we've been fortunate to serve 55 plus organizations across 16 states since we launched, right? And those are schools, those are districts, those are larger nonprofit organizations, and those are foundations as well, are kind of the four scopes of organizations we work with. I think a lot of our work is kind of focused on two aspects. On the non-school side, we call it strategic implementation. So it's our take on strategic planning or strategy issue. That's either like program development or a full-blown kind of new 2 to 3 year strategic plan, but with a really clear focus on data. But probably what separates the most is that clients is like us creating kind of mini tests along the way to allow if this like new program, this new strategy, this new technique, this new pricing model actually works before we spend 6 months writing it on paper, making it pretty, giving it to them, telling them peace out and good luck, and then let us know if it works after you're not paying us anymore. That doesn't seem good for kids or families or those that are paying us to help them. And so I think that's probably the biggest differentiator we have is that strategic testing piece. I think on the school front, we've done a number of projects around family empowerment. And so this is a different take, I think, on family engagement and hopefully a more nuanced and comprehensive approach. We've been supporting and helping schools rethink how they are supporting families, and not only supporting, but really creating more space at the decision-making table for families to support them and what they need as humans, and also what they need as parents supporting their learners and their scholars at home. So we kind of have two sides of the house, one kind of community organization focused and the other school focused.
Yeah, and I think that's important because when you think about family empowerment, and you especially think of marginalized communities, underrepresented communities, there tends to be this way in which that empowerment piece is really important, because community members maybe just don't know the systems. They don't even know what the barriers are in place. They don't even know that oh, I should try to get my, one of the things we always talked about in my school, like the parents who know, they know third grade is the grade when you claim your child is gifted and get them into the gifted track, and you move them through starting in third grade. And if I'm not a savvy enough, if I don't have that information or that push or that way to get my kid there, potentially my child is going to quote unquote lose out on something.
Yep.
So are those some of the things that you're working on, maybe similarly, differently? What does that look like?
Short answer, yes. Long answer, here it comes.
It's complicated.
Yeah, right. I think the larger, like zooming out with our model, what we try to do with any particular school is help collect data from families. And so survey data or focus group data at the beginning of the year, understanding of the 800 families in K through 8 that you are serving. Do they feel engaged at the school? Do they feel supported? Do they know who to talk to? But also, like, do they feel empowered as a school, helping connect them to resources around running for school board, around helping their child get into, gifted classes, as you said, right? Do they know how to attend, and do they feel confident about an IEP meeting, right? So kind of like transactional, we would say, but important, like the school's phone number, the teacher's phone number on the engagement lens, but then also on the empowerment lens, like what do these adults that you are serving, that you have the privilege to serve, want and need in their everyday lives, right? And so that data collection piece is really important. And then I think from there, whether it's like external facing empowerment events, as we call them, or professional development sessions that we're helping kind of craft and support with the schools and supporting the teachers, is then kind of using our connections and our process to help connect those families to resources. And so financial literacy, homeless or kind of sustainable home organizations to help them with affordable housing, kind of academic support for either their own continuing education or supporting their students. And so some of those kind of key resources that we get from that data, that survey form, and then from there helping connect families to those pipelines and those processes. And then, of course, as any good former educator, doing the post survey and also like outcome data each year to understand, how many families created a budget and began to save $1,000 that focused on financial literacy, how many families signed up for, X, Y, or Z program or series or initiative. And so results change based upon the data and the request that families are requesting based upon what they need and want. And then, of course, from there, we're able to help tailor and craft the model to each school to best support those schools and those families.
So in high school and in college, I tend to think people fall into one of two categories, right? So you're either,
categories.
Here we go. I'm going to place you where I think you go. They're either, but you're a tricky one because you are a leader as well, which typically means you're big picture running an organization. You have to see how all the parts are moving and working together.
Sure.
But then there's this nuance, specificity, detail, especially when we're talking about data and numbers and analytics. So where do you fall the majority of your time? And how does that serve you in your role and in the work that you aspire to do?
Yeah, good question. I don't know. Bad answer, but it changes daily.
We could check the data. We could start collecting data now on this.
Yeah, and it's
Greg
a good
cracked
question,
a smile midway through the podcast, indicating
it's a good question, but also tough because, like, when you read leadership books or anything else in grad school outside of it, you hear about, like any large scale leader running a large organization, they're painted as like this visionary that just like says crazy motivational things, and then like other people run around and just like get the shit done.
Yeah.
Right? It never feels like it's that easy, because I really wish we could just like, I'm just gonna like throw some shit out and the rest of the team will work really hard and do it, or vice versa. Like if we're focused on details and somebody else on the team is focused on macro, like, so I always think it's a little bit of both. I think in my own individual growth, I started so detail oriented because I was a teacher. I was in a classroom take that back, 7 hours a day for 3 classes, 90-minute blocks of 3 high school students, figuring out how do I get my 90 to 110 students proficient on earth science and physical science over those 3 years. And so much of that was like maybe a little big picture of like rethinking how I could be a better teacher, but also like calling families, looking at my grade book, right? Like building lesson plans. Like that's about as nitty gritty as it gets.
Yeah.
But I think in my own leadership development, I have to seek out other team members that also have that detail focus and can support clients on our end. And then fortunately, as we grow, I need to develop my own muscles to, I guess, metaphorical muscles to continue to think big picture so we can continue to serve, so we can continue to have clients, continue to pay our team, and continue to think about how we're going to grow as an organization. So a long way of saying both.
Yeah. Well, and that's a really good way to put it, because it's that constant balance. And teachers, aside from the working with adults, right, and quote unquote managing adults, which I'd argue any day, if you can manage teenager, no adult in the world, like if you can work with a teenager, and because a kid in 30 seconds will drop you down to nothing in high school. I mean, nothing, right? So if you can manage, brutal, which is why I love teenagers, which is what I missed when I left the classroom and started working as an administrator
with adults
because of the BS. I'm like, I'm being direct with you. Can you just tell me it like it is? I don't care. There's no power position here. Just tell me. Because in a teenage classroom with teenagers, yes, at the end of the day, you have the authority, but the last thing you want to do is send a kid to the dean and give away your authority, right? Last thing you want to do. So anyways, all that to say, I would love for you to share a little bit about what you're thinking right now. As you know, Tim Gonzales, who I'm married to, is a physics teacher. Cool. And so, I've been a little annoyed watching him the last several days, sleep in and, whatever.
Annoyed could have went a number of ways there. I was wondering where you're going to go there.
Yeah, no, sleeping in. Believe me, there's a number of ways that could go, but sleeping in was it. Well, I had to get up. Sure. And my sister just got a new job as a counselor. She's been a stay-at-home mom for a while. And so she was stopped in today, and she was saying, I was like, listen, everybody's going to be in for a rude awakening because everybody's full force in August now, right? We've been in this weird, strange, almost 2 years of schooling, and most states, at least our state, Illinois, New York, they're saying all in. If you want to stay home, if you want to be remote, it's going to be totally different for you now.
Sure.
And there's going to be, I think, what kids want. Those expectations are students we've not been able to find. So what are you thinking it's going to look like in the fall? And how are you preparing to support schools come fall?
Yeah, another good question. I think it's going to look different, and I think it should look different. I think we try to be of mind in that the current educational system is failing many students, and not for lack of good people not trying to do that, but the way structural inequities have been set up in our country for a long time. And so we were of the mind that, outside of some of the obvious negative effects of the pandemic, what positives could be gleaned at a personal level, but also rethinking what school will look like, what better of a time, both unfortunately and also fortunately, to be able to rethink and pause what our education systems looks like. And all to say, I think there have been some positives and of course some additional negatives. So with that being said, I think there's going to be and should be a lot of hard conversations, but also actual day-to-day changes of like what curriculum delivery and school looks like, both in the traditional school day and hours, and then within that umbrella, in-person instruction and online instruction needs to be considered, right, very differently about what works. But then even just the idea of outside of the traditional school day, what does instruction and learning look like outside of those days or outside of those school or outside of traditional daily schools or daily hours of school? And so those are like macro responses, but I think it's going to be really important. The best school districts, the best CMOs, the best individual schools that I think are going to prepare all their students really well are the ones that continue to offer many options within one particular school. And do it in a way that's responsive to what they need, right? And so I think within that, we are helping our schools and those that support schools think about who their population is, the options they have to best serve those populations, and also, which often gets overlooked, back to our family empowerment work, not, in our opinion, enough are inviting families to the table to tell them what they want and need. It's very, even like with the ESSA funding and the ARP funding coming out, a lot of like
Yeah.
backroom things happening
Yes.
in
Yep.
boardrooms.
You know
Trying to,
why? I think that comes from fear, right? There's this fear because and I'll just,
please, yeah,
there's this, being in the system, there's this monolithic bureaucratic political machine that causes many people in those positions
yep,
to feel very afraid of what they might hear. And they've been conditioned potentially over the years, because many times these administrators and people who are in the system
mm-hmm,
or board members are this, they've been in the system, they've been in the right in this, and so they have experience with those who have the loudest voices, right? And they don't have experience with, how do I create a place and a space where other voices, all voices, can be heard, respected, validated. Because the work really is about where you started. I love where you started the interview when I said, "Who are you?" You said, "I'm a human," right? Because this work is human work.
yep,
It is people to people work. And when the people who have the power are afraid they're going to lose some sort of whatever it is, and they don't have the skills or the abilities to navigate some of those complexities in that conversation, I think that's
mm-hmm,
where we see some of the things that we've seen
yeah.
politically.
100%. Yeah, it's applicable to how districts and CMOs will respond to the pandemic. It's indicative of like how they respond to third grade reading scores or the lack of reading scores. It's indicative. And one thing we push on a lot is like charter district collaboration. What we've seen has been really good for schools and communities across our work. And I think one thing we push districts on a little bit is, rather than us as a district perhaps saying, it's the charter school's fault for stealing people or creating choice, right? And one, like there's no ownership of humans in this way anymore. There's racial and political undertones there. But perhaps we need to listen to the families leaving the schools that are under our power to understand why they're doing that. And perhaps if we respond in an intentional way to better serve them, either the way in which this, bully charter school down the street is saying they're going to, or actually are, if we are able to genuinely listen to that feedback and respond to that feedback, they likely won't leave. They'll feel more bought in because we are seeking ways to better serve them. And that might seem, hypothetical and a bit too high level, but in a business sense, families don't belong to districts.
Correct.
Right. And so districts, schools, any type of school, private school, charter, public, traditional public, need to be 100% customer focused and centric, because families have the power to leave, and they should have the power to leave, because they have their own right and fruition to choose the best option for the families and their kids. And all that to say, if any of those positions and leaders of power, I think, take the mindset and the approach and the ability to listen to those they are serving, because that's what they should do, in our opinion, results will be better, engagement will be better, communication will be better. So it sounds too maybe hypothetical or aspirational, but we believe deeply that that's a very serious step in any organization serving kids and communities that needs to take that serious.
That I had a huge aha. I don't know if you saw it above my head, the glow, when you said families don't belong to districts. I immediately went to two places. The first being this idea of ownership. People don't own other people, right? So belonging, there's something, an undertone of they're like, those are mine. No, they're not yours, right? They're human beings. They're who are inherent of worth and dignity and all the things that we believe all humans should have. And so then the second part was, and that's why creating cultures of belonging and inclusion are so important, because then choice it really becomes about choice, right? I want to go to the school where I feel I belong.
Sure.
So everything you said makes all that to say, I know this was just for me, but makes so much sense on why we need to, instead of resist that parent who may have a complaint or may have a different way of seeing things, actually by embracing that, you create even stronger cultures of belonging.
100%. Yeah. And I think, right, if in any community, if you say the word school choice, either charters or private schools will come up or something else. And it's always the default that when you say school choice, those you are serving are choosing to leave your schools. And that's not true. That's like a phrase, it's an option. And oftentimes people are defaulting either because they're afraid of competition or other options or something else, that if other options are created, families will leave. And I think if those who feel strongest about who they are serving, what they're doing, feel confident in their delivery model and their product or their services, it's a competition. But if you're doing really well, both in schools and the Chicago Bulls, Jordan's not going to choose to leave if the culture is there and Pippen's there and Rodman's there and the coaches there and everything else. And in our experience, and both mine, if you're working really hard to support families and students, all these other schools could open, but it's so damn hard to like pick up, leave, move, go to a new school, get new uniforms, figure out the new teachers, everything else. Like parents got to be really pissed to do that and or just really want better options, because it's so much easier to just default and stay at the school, right?
Right.
So if community leaders and when community leaders begin to really support and listen to families and do it in a genuine way, it doesn't matter what other schools open down the street. If you can control what you can control for, things will work out.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Also, the BJ Armstrong connection, which brings my Chicago to Charlotte narrative right there.
I knew we were going to do it.
You passed that one off for me. I appreciate that. But no, truly, our parents, by empowering them and allowing them the opportunity to have a voice, and I'm not saying that it needs to be complete chaos, right? That you have hundreds of people in a room shouting. No, you put there are structures in place, and I'm sure you guys know very well how to do that. Do you want to talk about some successes you've seen, or one of your favorite outcomes, or something like that, that really, like when you're having that day where you're like, why did I do this again? Remind me why I started, what my hope was, what do you fall back to?
Yeah. Well, as a good business owner, I'll say they're all my favorite, since they're all parts of our journey as a business owner.
That's
and they're all like our kids, right? Say a little flippantly, but also true. I think I'll give you two examples. And so from the family empowerment work, it stemmed from two schools, both a district and a charter school. They're still working together. It's been 5 years now, sharing resources, sharing ideas, sharing best practices to support families. But of course, it's bled into others around lesson planning and transportation and all the important variables of running schools. But that work has grown to 7 schools across Charlotte, 4,500 families, presenting at national conferences and state conferences as well. So it feels real that we are beginning to help, in partnership with our school partners, schools and systems, rethink how to leverage the expertise of families in a genuine way.
Yeah.
To empower them and also drive change at their own school and their own community in a number of ways. And so if it all falls apart tomorrow, we'll feel really good about that. I think on the other end, we've worked with a group for a long time called Profound Gentlemen, which is a nonprofit based in North Carolina, has a pretty good presence in Chicago actually as well. That's focused on retaining and developing male educators of color. They've been one of our longest standing partners, but we've been forced to help them, I think, do two things. One, like increase their just philanthropic muscle. And, fortunate they've raised close to, honestly, mostly because of them, we've just helped out a little bit, but have raised, a little over $5 million since they've been around supporting male educators of color, but also increase their earned revenue arm and help them begin to charge, which they rightfully should, school districts to support their own Black male and male educators of color in the districts. So as a business model, they are diversifying and being less reliant on philanthropy and charging school districts to partner in the space with them to support their male educators of color. And so those two on tough days, although we don't have tough days as business owners, it's always a pleasure.
It's always sunshine and rainbows.
If for some reason it's raining and there's no lollipops around, those two kind of projects are ones that we feel strongly about.
That's amazing. Yeah, I've got a series coming up. I think I've got about 4 Black male administrators.
Great.
And so I'm like, oh, I've got to space these out because this I could see being like a really cool series and getting some themes going and some content going.
That's smart. That's really good.
Especially because when I've worked the majority of my career, I've worked in underrepresented low SES, primarily black and brown students. And one of the things that I early on noticed, especially with my young Black males, is if you had any sort of quote unquote, what would be considered smart, you were smart in some way. And that's in air quotes because that's not my definition, but SAT score, whatever. Teaching was never a choice, right? Like that was never for those. I'd be like, honey, you love history. Why wouldn't you be a history teacher? Oh, miss, that I'm not going to be a teacher like that. I'm going to be a lawyer. I'm going to be like, you'd hear those things. And so I feel like we miss, even through that pipeline of this work that they're doing, which is great once they're out, but we need to build that pipeline in our schools, certainly right now, because we're missing out on a whole population of students that would be amazing teachers, amazing educators.
100%. Representation matters in all fields, particularly in education. And I think that's very true in the work you're doing and the work we've seen as well. I think, related to that, 2 things, right? Like education in general has a branding issue in terms of careers in education for all people. So that's nothing to just glance over, but also with the importance of diversity. Sharif El-Mekki, who runs the Center for Black Educator Development out of Philly, who's a good contact, shout out to Sharif, has cited research, and I can't cite it, but I'm just going to cite him and hopefully he'll back me up here, but has said in a study, the average white female is asked about or invited to be a teacher by the time she's in 1st or 2nd grade, but the average Black male is not asked or invited to be a teacher until like 11th or 12th grade. If you think about that cycle repeating over and over again for the last 200 years of our country and other countries as well, that in addition to other things have some very serious ramifications. And so those 2 kind of both the branding issue of education and the structural inequities and just that research is not surprising, but certainly an additional data point to consider how to respond to building a pipeline of more diverse talent.
Yeah, that's a great point. And with the work you're doing with empowering families, if you can extend that, one of my biggest gripes was like, why aren't we bringing parents into high schools? We want them to do, I take a day off to go do cookie day or Valentine's Day party to be mom of the year. I'd much rather be, and I get it, it's different, but we need our parents in our schools and being a partner in the education process. You said something that really kind of struck out as I've been thinking a lot about, as I've learned a lot about marketing and the way, right? Because when you're in education, you don't need to market unless maybe like your work with charter schools. But for public education, it's a given. Your customers are coming to you, whether you suck or not, whether you produce or not, you are guaranteed a new set of customers every year. Right. And so there is, it's interesting because that's why many of the things that you see out there are so antiquated looking, just the look and feel of even websites and whatnot. I'm wondering how we can, use what we know is good practice in business around that marketing and how you can potentially use that with your families and really see this push that we're seeing in every other part of the internet. And pretty much every other industry except for education. Nobody's talking about niching down for kids, right? What would that actually mean if we used a model like that?
It would look different. It would mean success, hopefully, for all populations across our country. I think I'm going to answer that. I think there's a lot of good people working on this, both in districts and charters and other communities. There's a lot of systems that prevent them from moving as fast or as innovatively as what they want, which I think is a larger conversation of the systems in which we currently operate in and why they exist, but also if they should continue to exist. So that's a separate podcast episode, but I'll leave that there while also not just like damning everybody. And I think there's probably just a few things, right? Like seeking customer feedback and insight is really important. And in schools, that would be students, that would be teachers, that would be the families you're serving. And to your point around getting parents to high schools, like many times they're not invited. Like either, principals may want to, deans may want to, they may not have the capacity, which is a very real issue, but there's also just not actual support and staffing to invite, recruit, support families in an intentional way, in an ongoing way to a school throughout a year. So I think that's like customer feedback seeking is part one. And I think accountability amongst other things is important too. Like outside of, school choice and charters and maybe privates, being really clear on like what happens when students leave and families leave and academic achievement is not met. And I don't necessarily think this needs to be all about EOG testing or anything else, but very clearly, if we don't serve our clients well, we are looking for jobs soon. And so every day we get up thinking about how we can serve our clients better. One, because that's our job and we want to, but two, if not, we will be doing something else very soon. And I, don't necessarily think at all that schools need to be like a for-profit commodity. It's not the argument here, but the argument to your point is how can you take some best practices to elevate everybody's game? And in this situation, elevating everybody's game elevates every student in our country, which then elevates, every state, every community, GDP, taxes, all things that seem good for literally everybody.
And that is why I so believe in public education, right? In the United States of America, it is the promise of a free and democratic society by having an educated people, right? Like that is one of our human rights, and all of our students deserve that same level of understanding and expertise. Even to the nuanced way, I was working on something yesterday on copywriting. And even when I wrote my dissertation, I did this, but they call it copy working, where when you want to get really good at something, say I'm not an artist, I am a creator. So I want to get better at my copywriting skills. And so you just take somebody's work and you literally deliberately, slowly write it out. Word for word, punctuation mark for punctuation mark. And it's short form, but it took me, I don't know, it probably took me an hour to hand write it all out, get the punctuation, the comma, yada, yada, all correct. And I was an English teacher. I spent my career when I was in the classroom as an English teacher. And I thought, this is real. Like this, if I were teaching tomorrow, if I were going into the classroom tomorrow, there would be no Romeo and Juliet 10-page paper. That's ridiculous. Not real. You're never going to walk into your real life doing that, right? So how do we take some of these things that are real, that will position students to make money even today with some of those skills? I'm not even talking post high school. What are we talking about? Oh, for your future. Your future is now. Let's teach them to do this stuff now. See, you're the guest and I'm making it all about me. I forget sometimes. I get excited. On my own podcast.
No, it's great. Yeah, it's yours. I'm just here. I think that's right. And also just the ability to do that, right? And I think it's a curriculum issue, or maybe something I'm hearing you say, right? It's not. And the thing is, like, I think most people would say that are nuanced in this, that like probably don't need textbooks. Fine. But like, you can't just get rid of textbooks tomorrow. Like probably don't need as much EOG or end of year testing, like fine. But like implementing that solution is a much longer road than like getting people to agree to it. And because of the systems we find ourselves in, getting to like a brighter future with more, equitable education options, in our opinion, is less like knowing the right way to do it and helping systems either tear them down, frankly, or move faster getting there. Because some of those things, I think, we all know, like the Pythagorean theorem idea, but like we don't know how to balance our checkbook, or like how taxes work, or how refinancing a house works. And those seem like core skill sets that perhaps would be, have more longevity in a human's life than perhaps none of the shit I can remember right now that I learned in 5th grade science.
No, because it's not relevant. it's not necessary right now for us. And so it really is about getting back to that spot where I always call it this. I'm really good at finding the ethical wiggle room. And when COVID hit, like you can't do that. We can't do this. We can't do that. Well, all of a sudden, oh, guess what? I guess we can do that.
Sure.
Apparently seat time or whatever these Carnegie units, whatever the things are that you want, SAT, we have to have, you have to have it. Oh my God. I guess maybe we don't.
Yeah, that's right.
So as we wrap, as we kind of, we wind it down, I've got two questions for you.
Okay.
How is it? And I mean, this is really serious. This is the most serious question of the entire, right? Of the entire podcast. Nobody listens to anything else. This should be the thing that they should know about Shermco. Is that you have a dream, and this dream involves Boyz II Men and Bruce Springsteen. And so I'm wondering how we're going to get this dream to manifest.
Yeah, I've reached out to them both via Instagram.
Okay.
They have not responded yet, but that's okay. I'm pretty persistent in many aspects of my life. So I'm doing everything I can in my control to make this dream work. Would appreciate, any phone numbers or contact information you have so I can get to Bruce and the E Street Band as well as Boyz II Men.
To have a joint concert, and I'm guessing you want.
Oh, you want me to tell people about the actual dream? Is that?
Yeah. Well, I was hoping you would, but I filled that in for him.
I went straight to logistics. See, not macro.
Yeah. I see. I'm painting the vision for the listeners.
I think what you're alluding to is something that has found its way into my bio around Boyz II Men and Bruce Springsteen touring together, and ideally me being at that concert as well as my friends and family. I think the backstory there is Boyz II Men was like some of my first musical love. I think second or third grade, very randomly in Rensselaer, Indiana. Uncle Bill in a rural part of Indiana had no idea he liked music. Didn't know he had cassette tapes. I think I stayed a summer or maybe a few weeks throughout the summer. I was playing basketball. I just was rummaging through his front porch. He had a Boyz II Men cassette. And I was like, this looks cool. Didn't know Uncle Bill listened to this sort of music. Put it on and just played basketball every day that trip over the summer when I was in second or third grade, listened to Boyz II Men. And just as a second or third grader, loved it. And then didn't really know about Springsteen until college, honestly. And I think from there, really like people with passion, whether it's about food or music or exercise. And so feel like oftentimes the question, particularly around music, what's your favorite music? That's a hard thing for me to answer because I like so much music. I appreciate diversity, hopefully in all aspects of my life. And so rather than just going to a country concert with 3 country musicians or a jazz concert with 3 jazz musicians, I selfishly really want to go to a concert with Bruce Springsteen and the E Street Band and Boyz II Men
at the same time in Charlotte.
100%. And we I don't want to say got close, but a few years ago when there was this Backstreet Boys, Boyz II Men tour, and then I found out. I'm still aghast by this that Boyz II Men was opening for the Backstreet Boys, which seems disrespectful, wrong.
Yep.
I can't find many other humans, unless you're lying to me, that agree with that lineup. So I don't know who made that decision. Don't love it. Feel like it needs to be reconsidered. But nonetheless, I think we're getting closer there. I feel like they probably like each other, and we just need to make that connection happen.
Got to find a way. All right. Well, we're going to put it out there. So
you speak it into the universe, it'll begin.
I could totally see that. And the thing is, I can totally picture you listening to one side of that tape more than the other. Totally trying to hit every jump shot. Right. Yep. Yeah. That's awesome. That's 100%. That's a great story. I'm really glad that you shared that with us. I don't know who my tour lineup would be, but it'd be something crazy, Yanni.
Sure.
And Depeche Mode or something going way back to, just total random. Totally.
Could we count on you to buy a ticket?
And maybe Sade. I'd throw Sade in there somehow. Yeah.
Could we count on you to buy a ticket to the Boyz II Men Bruce Springsteen upcoming tour?
Yeah, if I have somehow some way to do with that, I'm so in.
You're coming. Perfect.
I will.
We got two people.
Yeah, I'll make Tim Gonzales go, and he's a science guy, so
We
you
got
guys
three.
would probably have things to
This is
talk
how
about.
movements start.
I know. All you need is one first follower.
That's right. There you go.
Right. One first follower. So as we wrap it up, two final questions. Is there anything that I didn't ask you that you wanted to mention? I mean, I know we got some good stuff, but just in case there's something more, I know there might be more in there. It's the first one. And then the second one is, where do you hope education will be in 10 years?
To your first part, like we think a lot about feedback and accountability, both on our team, on the teams we serve, and also as it comes to systems and particularly school districts and schools and communities. And oftentimes both of those words have negative connotations. Previously in my life, I was somehow a semi-former college athlete, and feedback and accountability in the football field was like baked into you every day. And it wasn't a bad thing. It was like, you're bad at trying to make this tackle, stop being bad, work on these 3 drills, be better. You're not bad anymore. Very just like cut and dry. And then oftentimes in my own experience teaching or in others, it's like, you're kind of like cutting around, you're like being mean to a kid, or you're cutting around, your lesson plan was shit. And like, I just think there's like, you don't need to cuss at people, but there's like a very real way feedback and accountability can be offered in all organizations to improve the performance and the efficiency of everything. So again, much longer conversation, but we think a lot about that. And then in 10 years, I think maybe with feedback and accountability, and also with some of the other things we tried, I think hopefully with all of us working together, education looks more equitable for all populations, but specifically for Black and brown populations across our country.
I agree. And I hope that as well. Well, thank you so much, Greg Schembreck. See, I got Schembreck at Schembreck Co. They got nothing about that right. See, the thing I have is this thing in my head where this my producer's gonna be like, did you want me to edit that out or should I keep that in there? When I know I have to say somebody's name, I totally trip myself out and then overthink it. It's kind of like a speech when somebody has a
jumpy.
Yeah. So
I'm gonna help you. It's 2 syllables. You ready?
Yeah, let's do it. Sherm Co. Easy. Sherm Co. I mean, it's so easy. And I even had my mnemonic device, which is it rhymes with germ, and I still screwed it up. So, Greg, that's what you get. But thank you for
accountability. Feedback and accountability.
Feedback and accountability. Hey, and I'm here to learn. I'm here to learn. So if you've got anything besides mnemonic devices, don't overthink it. Stop tripping yourself up. I'll take it. A voice recording, maybe just play the voice recording. Pre-record that part. Hey, happy to have you here. This was a great conversation and really appreciate it.
Thanks so much, Dr. Gonzales. Thanks so much for checking out the Square Pizza Pod, making a few selfish requests. If you enjoyed the episode, please leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. It helps spread the word about the podcast, and share this with a friend. We appreciate it. Thanks.